Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Dan Cunliffe. Dan is the co-founder and managing director of Pangea Group, a technology company that specialises in the Internet of Things. What's interesting about my conversation with Dan is how he breaks down these new and frankly pretty technical technologies into understandable examples so that our listeners can start thinking about how this will impact their own businesses. And be sure to listen to the end, where Dan shares some great insights into the current projects that Pangea Group are involved in here in Kingston. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the Internet of Things or want to know more about what it takes to run a successful technology company, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Dan Cunliffe, to the Inside Kingston podcast. Dan, I'm really excited about this conversation as there are many facets of the world of the Internet of Things, or IoT, which I know you have a lot of experience in, and I think that myself and other local businesses can learn a lot from. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So where did you grow up?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me, Amir. I really appreciate it. I grew up in South Africa. If the accent hasn't given it away yet, often can be confused with a slam between an Australian and a New Zealand one, but definitely South Africa, Cape Town to be specific, and even more specific, a town called Somerset West. And yeah, probably one of the coolest places in the world to grow up, if you get a chance to do that there.
Fantastic. And where did you go to university and what did you study, Dan?
Yeah, so I was always quite keen to go to university. I had a lot of people who always wanted to send me and sort of go, but I actually went to university to play rugby. That was my kind of first calling card. The university was University of Stellenbosch, very well known for its wine regions and things like that. So rugby was going pretty well, and I ended up deciding to really go for it hard and did applied mathematics and computer science as my degrees. But the rugby was definitely the pull there, and ended up really enjoying that part of it, and actually ended up continuing to study longer than I probably wanted to, because I was so enjoying the sports side, and ended up doing a postgrad in applied mathematics on its own, and then ended up doing a kind of bridge of a teaching degree, a PGCE, postgrad certificate education. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed my time out there.
Fantastic. And Dan, let me ask you this, because we are of a similar generation, you and I. What was your first experience, or at least that you can remember, with a personal computer?
That's a great question. I think I have we have quite a large family. I'm a only child, but my mom's cousins was about 22 of them or something crazy like that.
Oh, great.
And one of her uncles had this, I don't even know what it was, but it had like Lotus 123 before Excel. I sort of had that going with it. And that was my first experience. He made me do spreadsheets for him for like his businesses and stuff. And I think that was the first time I sort of understood a little bit about pressing the keyboard. And actually, you've just jogged another memory. My uncle, he worked for one of South Africa's largest fertilizer companies, but he was more in the sort of IT side of things. And I'd go with him as a 6-year-old to go and start up the mainframes.
All right.
And we'd essentially carry what is like a dustbin lid and sort of put about 20 of these things in to the mainframe. And looking back, that was probably equivalent to the Mac that's in front of me right now. Back in the day.
Absolutely. And from a postgrad in teaching to IT, how did you get into the field in the first place?
Well, I guess coming to the UK was pretty much straight after university back in 2007. So I've been in the UK for about 12 years now. And my grandfather is from here originally. So that was one of my real interests to come over here, probably, see where the forefathers have been and come and have a look.
Yeah.
But getting into this market was, I've always doing the background I had, applied maths, computer science. That was always like an analytical background for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up proper getting into the Internet of Things. I guess roughly after Telefonica and O2 in the UK, just sort of roughly after that. And that's probably a story we're going to tell through the interview.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your career journey so far.
Pretty interesting, I think. While I was at university, I was sort of bitten a little bit by the entrepreneur bug, and combined that with sort of lack of funding and things like that. I started a small business to sell plastic book covers to primary and high schools in the area of Stellenbosch. I used to drive around in my little VW Golf and go and sort of sell these plastic covers, which I acquired from a guy, geez, probably about 1,000 miles away, who had a factory. And long story short, that was sort of my first decent role. But probably my career really started here in the UK. Originally a teacher because I had the PGCE, and it was a quick way to get money in, because when you arrive in the country with rands, it basically just falls out of your pockets pretty quick because of the exchange rate. So I started teaching in a school in Tooting, taught maths and science there for a little while, but very short time, and then ended up moving into being a programmer for a company that did insurance documentation. But my kind of real love was, I guess, telecoms in a way, and from there on got headhunted into a more of a account management style role at a company called The Cloud, which is actually still around. It's a Wi-Fi providing company that does public Wi-Fi on everything from your sort of local Wetherspoons right through to Nuffield Health, something like that. So I worked there for about 3 or 4 years, managing clients like Network Rail or Arsenal Football Club. Mm-hmm. And sort of through that grew in really enjoying working with people as well as working in a kind of telecoms environment, which is where I decided to change up and join O2. I guess that's where the entrepreneur stuff really started to happen. At O2, I was actually joined as a contractor to look at a part of their business where they hadn't ever taken it into a B2B environment. They basically had a broadband network and had never taken it to a B2B environment. And my task was, could you come in and obviously try and generate some business, but equally devise a strategy for their B2B side? And I very quickly realized that they were actually a small talk business or a small BT wholesale, and they didn't realize this at the time because it was a very small part of the business. Okay. And that to me was probably the most important part of my career, with those sort of 6-7 years at O2, where I grew this business from I think it was about 2 clients we had and about 300,000 turnover to just over almost 100 clients and a 10 million pound turnover in about 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really exciting time. It was a great product. I mean, we had a very good broadband product, which seems archaic now, but at the time was a super, super product. And I just got into understanding how other people's businesses work, and particularly from a wholesale perspective.
Yeah, and then you eventually went on to found Pangea with a colleague of yours from O2, I believe.
Yeah,
and we're sitting here today in Kingston in what has become, I think, the hottest day in history. And tell me a little bit about how you guys started the company from your bedrooms, I guess, with no aircon, I understand.
Yeah, that's the exact story. There's a really funny story I told my team earlier today, which was, I always thought that people coming from South Africa is pretty hot out there as well, but I always thought the people who had aircon in their car were, obviously a little bit more affluent than those who didn't. And I sort of said the story to the guys, and I was like, man, you should have seen the first time when we started Pangea in our rooms. But then secondly, the office we had just down the road in Surbiton, no aircon. And I said, on a day like today, it would be awful, but luckily we've got some aircon now, which is quite cool.
So what were your aspirations for the company when you set it up?
To be honest, Chris and I know each other a long time because we worked in O2 together. Ironically, he's Australian, but he came to the UK within a month of me coming. But we didn't know each other, obviously. We only met at O2. And he's one of the more kind of brilliant people that I know. He runs all of our operations and tech over here. But we're kind of on a par when it comes to our backgrounds. We both studied the same thing, and we kind of have gone into slightly different parts of that. But aspirations was to kind of the challenge really of starting something that I could be in. I wouldn't like. It's not about being in control, but it's about kind of being able to create something, if that makes sense. Almost kind of get your hands dirty, be involved, being able to make decisions that really count, but equally develop people's careers if it got to that, and be really influential in other people's careers. And we had a really kind of, decent idea about the Internet of Things, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, but coming from understanding how the growth that I experienced at O2 and what it took to do that, I felt like I could contribute that in my own environment. And I think, timing is everything, right? There's timing is sometimes more important than other things. And, we had just left O2. We obviously had a small redundancy because they sold the business that we had created there. And I said to him, we should try something. And Chris being Chris, he was like, I'll back you. Let's go for it. And we kind of sought out to start a IoT business.
Fantastic. And what does Pangea look like today?
Well, today, probably the first thing just to kind of clear up is, so we the Internet of Things is quite an interesting market, and not a lot of people kind of understand everything about it. And I'm sure we'll dive into it a bit further. But today we are an IoT ecosystem provider, and that sounds a bit fluffy, but what it really is we provide the connectivity, whether that be a SIM card or any other type of connectivity that you can imagine, to a thing that could be a router, it could be a phone, it could even be a street lamp, right? It could be a fridge, something like that. And we then connect that thing to the internet using the connectivity plus an overlay of some sort of analytics. So when that fridge or that street light talks to the internet, it needs to talk via some kind of application layer. Why that's important is because you can't tell what that thing is doing or improve it or learn about it if you don't have an application layer. So these three things, connectivity plus a device plus an application layer, gives you a IoT story or an IoT product. And those things is effectively the nuts and bolts of what Pangea does globally now. So, we probably trade in four continents now. And we particularly work through our partner channel. And that's what I picked up at O2. I was sort of the head of wholesale for the broadband. So I really loved working with other companies and enabling them to make money out of what I do, or make kind of, changes in the way that they can create a margin-rich opportunity in what Pangea does. So we have 200 partners now, ranging between, some of them turn over almost 3 billion, 4 billion actually, some of them will do, and others will do sort of 1 million. That's the kind of partners we have now.
So Dan, as a company, when I was doing research on you guys for this chat, I noticed that you guys are really active online. So could you tell me a little bit about how you think about and use social media to engage with your audience?
Yeah, I kind of have this firm belief that marketing has got to be a very, very important part of your business, especially in today's age. Social media is one aspect of it. And I think you've got to kind of be in front of people even when you're not physically there. And that's what social media tries to give you. B2B environment probably better suited by, things like LinkedIn or, certain parts of Twitter. But I'm quite lucky. I've got an excellent marketing agency that I work with and have worked with since my days in O2. And they just take my vision and what I'm trying to create and do the things, in a very strong way. What I find from a kind of social media perspective is you don't want to get people, just hearing about the everyday normal stuff. You really have to think a little bit about strategically what you want to stand for, and also what that sort of persona is you want to create. And just be constant, kind of kind of keep saying the same thing several times, and then people will kind of buy into that sort of persona or type of company that you want to be. But it's a valuable tool, and I come back to the simplistic part: is you've got to be in front of people when you're not physically there.
Absolutely. It's a very powerful tool, and I think you guys are using it masterfully. And I think a lot of local businesses learn from just the simplicity of how you put your message out there. And it's very much targeted at your audience. So a lot of what you're talking about on YouTube might just be nothing to the average Joe like me, but that's not the point. The point is you know who you're speaking to, and you speak to them in their own language. So no, I think it's remarkable what you guys are doing on that front.
Just to add that, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. There are not everybody is a huge fan of LinkedIn, or not everyone's a huge fan of Twitter, etc. You've got to be quite capable of taking the same message and putting it across multi-platform, because you've got to talk to that person in their language. That makes sense, or in their social media preference. That's the other way.
Absolutely. So Dan, you guys recently opened your new head office here in Kingston. Why Kingston?
It's a great question, because, Chris is, at the time was living in Angel, which is North London. We had a few guys who were traveling in from sort of Waterloo area, and we were on the debate, and I have sort of lived in Surbiton, Kingston area for about 9 out of my 12 years. And so I love the area, and I really think it is some place to stay. And I was determined to stay here as best I could. And I'll be honest with you, we worked very hard with the council and Chamber of Commerce to try and understand why it was so difficult for us to find space in the first place, because it just seemed really, really difficult to find openings for kind of our size. We in the end decided to really get close with one of the people who was working at the council, and just literally plead with them to say, listen, we really want to stay here, or we're going to somewhere like Vauxhall, for example, to try and expand. You guys want to keep people here, help us to do that. And to their credit, the Kingston Council team actually found us a place here at Millennium House, which is just around the corner from the Marks and Spencers on the kind of main high street. And got us the interview with the estate agents, and we had a look at it, and we all kind of worked together. So that's not the only reason for staying, but I felt really close to it. We've hired a bunch of students from Kingston University over the years as well, during their breaks or during kind of placement work for, certain kinds of schemes or things they want to work on for us. So no, it just felt right. And it's paid dividends, because most of the people that are now in the office with us are working for us, are actually moving into Kingston because of it.
Are these connected machines and objects going to create new business opportunities? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, yes, is the answer. I think what we will find is, with the immediate advent of 5G, in the coming year, starting to increase the number of devices that can connect to the cell towers, and the way that 5G will be deployed. I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit later. I think there is this whole sort of, and you said we're in a similar sort of era. You can think back to things like Terminator, or places where the machines are coming and people are getting very nervous. I really believe in the fact that the efficiency is the outcome. We will deliver and create new jobs of different types to support efficiencies and the growth of how humans need to interact with our world. It's no secret that we are, running out of certain fuels. We're running out of certain, specific things on the earth, and we have to understand how we can use our, capabilities, the way we can connect things, the way we can learn about them. But most importantly, we need to automate that to actually make it viable, because you can't be doing these things manually. Hence, we need to employ the machines that we create to take care of that stuff, while we can look at, the analytics side of it, the changes we can make, the human feel to the new jobs that will be created. And I'm not just saying that because I have a company that runs Internet of Things. I'm saying that as someone who has a company that runs Internet of Things, because I believe in it so much that it has to be the way to go forward. Otherwise, my grandkids are going to really struggle when we get to that time.
Absolutely. And Dan, you've already given us a few case studies as to how the Internet of Things can work for people. And also, you gave us a description of the broad range of customers that you have. How would you suggest local businesses here in Kingston start thinking about the opportunities that the Internet of Things can present to them?
Yeah, I mean, I can take it from a very kind of close to home or a very kind of simple understanding of it, right through to, maybe sort of more blue sky. So if we begin at the very simplistic way, one of our best selling products is a very simple way that your business can keep running using a kind of failover mechanism on a mobile network rather than having a broadband or a fixed network. A mobile network is over the air, right? So you can't cut that line. You can't turn it off. And one of the products we've developed over the last sort of 18 months is a multi-network SIM card that connects to all the networks in the UK. So that's actually quite cool from a failover perspective. And people get a bit nervous when they run out of when they don't have 4G available to them. So a SIM that'll connect to Vodafone, EE, 3, those sort of things is really valuable. And if you're someone who's on the go, doing business in Kingston, if you have a shop, that's applicable to you. And that is a device being a router with a bit of connectivity being a SIM and having a portal that tells you whether it's on or off and keeps you running. Simple as that, right? So that's one way people in the borough can use it for sure. I'm actually working closely with some of the guys in the council at the IoT strategy. And the bits that we're working on is things like, how do we improve air quality by connecting, in quotes, sort of dumb things like our buses, our bus stops, the taxis, people's bicycles with sensors that can tell us more about what's going on in the environment, and then equally putting that on a platform that tells us what we can do to improve it. So where should we plant our trees? How should we change the way we deliver our waste management routes? These sort of things is then a little bit more elevated in IoT because, again, we're using sensors and devices with a level of connectivity and a platform to tell us what are the better ways to do our environmental changes. It doesn't apply so much to Kingston, but one of the cool ones I've been working on is understanding the depth of a drain and when the water level could change, sort of rise quickly. So in some of the more low-lying areas, it can become a problem with flooding. A few years ago, we had Oxford, I think, area that really struggled. And there's some products we've been working on that uses quite simple sensors that you would effectively cement to the bottom of a drain and then learn about the change in depth of that water. And if it changes too quick, you can actually start to alert the authorities to come and, evacuate people or make changes so that people don't lose houses. Not lose houses, but don't lose lives, or can at least be aware of what's coming along. Insurance companies are really interested in this sort of stuff, etc.
That's really fascinating. It just seems to me that there's so many use cases for the Internet of Things, which means that there's a lot of opportunity in this area for aspiring IT professionals too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say people who understand how to create or how to derive a return of investment or what can, I always had this idea of like, it would be really interesting to have a URL called That's Cool, because when I started this business, there were so many times people go, oh, well, that's really cool to do that thing. And I thought to myself, like anyone kind of getting into a market, if they ever had that idea, geez, wouldn't it be really cool if we could do this? After the if, that is the IoT to me sometimes, If I can connect that device and I can make it talk to an application layer of some sort, I can learn about it and I can make decisions on that. So people who've got creative minds don't necessarily have to be techie, but creative minds or really have a passion for how things need to be, I suppose, understood and then ultimately improved.
Excellent. Dan, what are some of the main challenges you see facing the Internet of Things over the next few years?
I think in the beginning, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we started, the biggest challenge was, I suppose, adoption and belief and sort of understanding. That was one of the hard things because you were constantly pushing information rather than people pulling it from you. I think going forward, it's really going to be more about the ubiquitous I suppose, application layers. How do we basically get many millions of devices to talk together rather than in isolation? Because it really starts to become super powerful, right? When you've got your smart cities talking with your applications from all different kinds of vendors and all different kinds of providers. That's a really big ask, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But I think that starts to become a little bit of a challenge where if we work too much in isolation, and I'm just putting it out there because, there's no kind of silver bullet for this just at the moment. But if Pangea goes off and builds the next, exciting a street light monitoring solution, and off we go, like we've done one in Kent already, right? So we do that. Then someone else comes into Kent and starts to say, well, we're going to measure and tell people where all the parkings are, because Kent's got a problem with parking. So we're going to tell people on an app where the parking availability is. Then you start to have all these different providers doing kind of similar things. When you think, well, why haven't we made the street light tell us where the parking lights are? And why have we not collaborated or things like that? So I think that's one of the big challenges, a kind of larger, wider collaboration between IoT providers and IoT related sensors. I think maybe something else is going to be the connectivity types. 5G is promising a lot. What it truly will deliver is quite possibly different for different things. Mm-hmm. And just making sure that we don't wait too long because of possible bureaucracy or possible slowdown in build to really achieve what some of these devices and sensors are capable of.
So look, Dan, you've mentioned the term 5G a few times, and I think most of us have now heard of 5G connectivity. What is it, and what could this mean for us?
So I was very fortunate earlier this week to present at one of my partner events, and they invited loads, about 100 people, and my slot was talking about 5G. And Pangea has been lucky enough. We won a government grant from Innovate UK to research elements of 5G, and particularly to use it in trying to improve cameras and the way not really improve cameras, but using 5G as the transport layer for imagery from inside an ambulance to try and, I suppose, decide whether or not we should stop the ambulance and do something right now, or take people to the hospital and do something from there, potentially saving lives, things like that. Probably elaborate a bit more on that if you want. But 5G, in essence, has, in quotes, been launched by EE and Vodafone in July, I think it was now. But it's not true 5G. It's kind of like enhanced 4G in a way, because the true 5G has got some specific nuances to it. Firstly, there's probably three main categories to what will be delivered. The first being something called enhanced mobile broadband, which to you and me, Amir, is kind of faster speeds on our phones, right? So for consumers and business people, that's where we're going to go a little bit quicker, and not just a little bit quicker, we're going to go quite a lot quicker. Okay. And that world's going to be sort of up to gigabits per second to our devices, and latencies of something like 4 milliseconds. So it comes with,
give me a parameter here. Put this into plain English compared to what I get on 4G today.
So on 4G today, you're probably getting around about, depends on your phone, because again, the better the phone, the faster you go. That's to do with some hardware stuff. But let's say my iPhone 10 on 4G, I can get sort of, probably 70 megabits per second upwards. That's kind of what I'm getting in a good 4G world, in a good one, when I'm in the right place, right? 5G is probably going to be, 10, 15 times that. Which is super, super fast. But there is a big caveat, and I'll try and explain this, because I used this earlier in something else, which is, imagine that you are connecting to a 5G cell, and the way that the data rates are trying to kind of get to these speeds is they use a very, very high frequency, right? So they really go very, very high, but they're actually pumping out the frequency a bit like shards of glass. Okay. So if you threw a whole bunch of shards of glass at very high speed down the road, anything that got in the way, it's going to shatter, which means you're not getting that amazing speed you thought you were getting. So what happens is they pump out at gigabits per second, like super fast, right? We're talking at 70 meg per second now on my phone at about 10, 15 times that speed. They're coming out to try and make things faster. The problem is the shard of glass is very, very brittle and can break. So even though you're pumping it out really fast, you're going to have these sort of shattering going on. And that's exactly what will happen with 5G. It will come out really fast and we'll have the shattering. But in the end, the kind of leftover parts of glass are still way faster than we're getting today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make total sense. And I'm guessing then, just to keep on that analogy, in the future, are the devices going to have better pipes so that glass can sort of be filtered in a more consistent way? Is that where this is going?
Yeah. So probably one of the most important things on the true 5G is that we will have a level of quality of experience. So the pundits, the guys at the top who are kind of making these decisions, and because of this 5G project we're on, are suggesting that you will have this level of experience that feels like you have your own personal pipe. That makes sense. Wow. So you'll have your own kind of personal pipe to the network that you use, and therefore your experience is going to be almost as if using an application rather than using a browser. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is pretty exciting because we're kind of speaking using an IP layer as well, and if we have a dedicated pipe for that, it just makes it I can do this anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. And Dan, you've already referenced it there briefly, but Pangea has recently launched a joint 5G project with Kingston University. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to earlier. It's actually part of something called the Knowledge Transfer Partnership. So where about 18 months ago, we embarked on trying to, I suppose, win or get selected by Innovate UK, which is the government body, for a project. And the project was to basically understand how we can use 5G better in certain scenarios. In this case, the health scenario, where we try and improve what happens inside ambulances and cameras, etc. So so we put forward our kind of ideas, and good news was we won the grant. We still have to contribute as well a little bit to it, but we won the overall grant. And essentially, Kingston University represents the academic side of the partnership. We work with a gentleman called Professor Christos Politis and Dr. Nada Philip, and they are one of the best in their field when it comes to wireless communication, etc. We then also obviously work with Innovate UK, who provide the other level of governance. And then Pangea represents the commercial arm. So our job is to work with the academics to create a commercial viable product, idea, situation that we could take to market, sell, provide more sort of, jobs or more, spend on UK curated products and services. And in the end, that's where the government gets their kind of reward for that. But as part of that, we had to hire someone who would run this project. And so we have a gentleman called Dr. Arslan Uzman, who is just one of the top people that I've met. And this is where my 5G knowledge truly comes from.
That's fantastic. And just on this front here, Dan, because we've mentioned Kingston University, for aspiring IT professionals who perhaps are soon to be leaving university, what sort of career tips would you have for somebody who wants to get into the field?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a specific course on IoT, although I stand corrected a little bit because we've launched some businesses out in Australia, and one of my guys out there is actually part of an IoT university / course. So I think it's coming, right? Right. What advice do I have for this market for them? I would say, you've really got to understand those three aspects I mentioned before. Truly understand how different devices and things connect. Like, how do these things talk to the internet? Because Internet of Things needs internet or needs connectivity. That's just the standard. So you really got to know how that works. Have a truly kind of passion for being able to learn about what happens when you can truly understand what something does, when you can get the attributes of anything that you look at, how a tree is growing, what its soil moisture levels are, what sort of pH levels is the water that's coming into it. And if you can learn about that, you can improve the way that the tree grows. It's a funny analogy, but you've got to have that kind of inquiring mind about these sort of things. And then finally, you've really got to put yourself into thinking, well, how do you demonstrate this to someone else? How does someone else see what in quotes, the tree is feeling or going through? And that's where the analytics layers come in, truly being able to visualize what the levels of pH are, what the soil moisture content is, how much that tree has grown. And then you take that forward, and that sort of starts to take your inquiring mind into a solution mind, right? It sort of takes it into what's the answers and how do we make more of that? Those are the kind of things you should have.
Yeah, it seems like a field that just has some really interesting big problems to be solved, and that inevitably is going to attract some fantastic minds to it. So that's very interesting. Dan, in preparing for this chat, I also came across the term intelligent connectivity a few times. And it seems to me that this is a combination of some of the terms that you've mentioned already, being the Internet of Things, 5G, and artificial intelligence. Could you please explain to us what intelligent connectivity means and why it is important?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so in 2018, I believe it was, at Mobile World Congress, which happens around about February of every year in Barcelona, I think that was the year when they started to bring intelligent connectivity as a sort of phrase. And what it means to me and maybe to some others is all about being able to be in total control of how we connect the things in the IoT. So what that means is we have a lot of services around the world that we have to be truly intelligent about the way the services are run. So, for example, we do several thousand forklifts in the US. And what is very important for the company that's using that service is to be able to connect to multiple networks, but equally be able to get alerts before they run out of connectivity or they need to change the service to something else. Your standard mobile services or your standard connectivity just doesn't do that. So you have to build in the intelligence, which means people get more control and in the end more confidence, right? Because they can understand it. So you are kind of on the right direction there, where you say, it's got these levels of artificial intelligence, because a lot of the connectivity and intelligent connectivity thinks for the customer, kind of thinks for the machine, makes the best decision, not only commercially, but quite often from a quality of experience as well, deciding for it. Do you know what? You're in this type of environment. We have to change the way that we're connecting now, because otherwise we're not going to deliver the outcome.
That's really interesting. Dan. Dan, for people who are aspiring to get into the field, does Pangea offer any resources that people can try to learn more about from on the Internet of Things?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'm always keen to try and help people who are truly interested or would just like to know a little bit more about how maybe we can help their business or help what they're up to. We are local here in Kingston, and I think anyone who's getting a chance to listen to this and says, I'm actually quite fascinated by that market. Happy for you guys to either come and grab a coffee with us or just come share some of the knowledge. And equally, if there's some entrepreneurs out there who are just thinking about maybe this market could be something that I could add to what I'm doing or learn about to improve, open invitation. Definitely, please do get in touch.
Oh, that's brilliant, Dan. Dan, what next for Pangea? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
There are some serious stuff on the go. So I can't give you like super specific details.
Of course,
I'll give you a little bit of high levels and kind of what's going on. So the projects we're working on could potentially, just really transform the way we do business today. There's a few in the go at the moment. For example, we're looking to help farmers up to 80,000 devices in India that we're busy looking at right now on how we can improve the way that farmers are working in the agriculture sense out there. We are very close to delivering a Wi-Fi enabled solution into one of, I guess, the best known taxi and transport names in the world. We are, we continue to do some of the things that we really love, which is the R&D side of the business, creating proof of concepts for interesting delivery points. One being up in Scotland, where the health, not just the health sector, but the public sector is struggling to get high bandwidth connectivity. We're looking at some clever ideas on how to get that done. And one of the simplest things we're doing, which I'm thoroughly enjoying, is people who don't, or people who are on the move all the time, using tablets and things like that. The multi-network solution that we've brought to market is just really, really cool, because people who use a single network, Vodafone, EE, O2, 3, any of the ones in the UK, at some point that does not have 4G. So we're offering a service that does have 4G on all the networks available, and that's been quite cool. I've really been enjoying that, and we're just sort of getting ahead on that market as well.
Dan, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
I mean, I think I'm one of those lucky people that I truly enjoy what I do. Like, I really do. Work isn't, sometimes it's harder days than others, but I genuinely love it. I think if I am going to relax, I'm still a massive rugby fan, back at the heart. So just sitting down to watch a game of rugby or going to watch it live is one of the coolest things to do. I still try and play every now and again as well. So that's probably my ways of relaxing. Obviously, I've got a beautiful family as well, so to spend some time with them is my relaxing time.
Amazing. Who are some of the people you admire and why?
Do I was thinking about this sort of question earlier, and I was trying to put my finger on it. And you can mention some amazing people, people like Nelson Mandela, who've been through some incredible hardships, but come out the other side pretty strong. Richard Branson's always a good one that people always go to. I mean, a specific person is pretty hard for me to kind of think about. I think the people I admire are guys or girls who truly go and rip up trees to get what they want. I've got some of them in my office that I see every day, and I sort of tell them, I'm like, I really admire you for making that thing happen against the odds. And that might sound a bit cheesy, but that's the honest answer. Like, I don't specifically. I think I admire equality, which is really, really pushing yourself as far as you can within the reasons to get what you need to get done.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Dan, is there a book that you've recently read that you would recommend to our listeners?
I don't know if it's kind of in the right frame of mind, but I've just started reading a recommendation about. I'm trying to remember. Oh, it's called The Shadow World, which is a fairly well-known book about the arms race and the kind of the underbelly of what goes on in a world where it's quite, I suppose, grotesque to think that you can sell arms and weaponry to countries, but there's no legislation properly in there to kind of protect these countries or protect the people that might be affected by it. And just some of the most fascinating things are coming out there. I mean, for example, countries don't actually tell, or the news doesn't tell us as consumers about, the UK has just bought X amount of billions worth of fighter jets or something like that. You never hear about these things, right? But they happen every day. And I just got stuck into reading this, and there's some fascinating stories in there.
That sounds like a really interesting book. I'll definitely check that out. Is there a movie or a TV series that you've recently watched that you would recommend to our listeners?
Just thinking about that now. I think, does anyone look past Love Island now these days? I don't know. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time for that. I was quite late into Vikings, actually. That someone was telling me about was just super, super good. So I got into that. But unfortunately, series just consume my life a little bit if I kind of get too much into it. Probably one of my favorite movies would be something like something like good old Forrest Gump. Love that movie. Or 12 Years a Slave. Some really, really cool movies that you can really get into.
Absolutely. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Yep. So if you probably the best place to start is on the website, which is pangea-group.net, which is Pangea-group.net. We're obviously on Twitter, which is @Pangea Connected, all one word. LinkedIn is Pangea Connecting Everything. That's the one over there. Those would be probably the main ones to go for. And we obviously have also on the website, everything is through there. So you can even pick up our podcasts, you can pick up our videos, everything that we do from there. So I would begin with the website, Pangea-group.net.
That's brilliant. And Dan, for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure I link to those resources on the show notes. Dan, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thanks so much. I very much appreciate it.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.